welcome, Roxanna. It's lovely to see you, evidently in your workplace there. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this short interview with London Mozart Players at Home.
It's a pleasure.
How is lockdown treating you? Is it hellish?
No, I mean, with all the hideousness and the worry and everything else, I have to say that we're very, very lucky. We live in a house where all 5 of us have somewhere we can go and be alone if we need to. And from a work point of view, because 90% of what I do is from home anyway, that hasn't changed so much. I have lost some wonderful premieres, which I was really excited about. But whenever I catch myself feeling slightly maudlin about it, I remember that I've actually been paid to do my part of that, and the musicians who are going to perform it won't be. So I feel very lucky that I'm in this position, and we, you know, in the end, the priority is that we are all happy and healthy, and we all come out of this happy and healthy, and we've just got to focus on that, haven't we?
Of course, and I suppose it would be only fair to say that you won't actually ever lose a premiere. It's only delayed, because when it happens will be the premiere.
Yeah, I do hope so. I do hope that this means that we're all going to be doubly busy in 2021, and I'm sure that will be the case.
Yeah.
But one of the premieres would take some considerable rescheduling, because it involves 10 choirs from all over the world coming to Berlin and a symphony orchestra. So it's going to take quite some replanning. So. So we have the fingers crossed.
When was that scheduled to be?
That was going to be the 1st of May.
Right.
1st of May at the Philharmonic in Berlin, and I'd spent most of last year writing the piece, so it was gutting. But as I said, you know, I was paid, I've been paid, and it hopefully will. I think we're going to try and do it virtually in some shape or form first anyway. But obviously we can't even do that until all the respective choirs are able to get together. So we'll see.
The last premiere of yours I happened to be at was your world choral seasons.
Oh yes, 4 choral seasons.
4 choral in November. But that's not connected with this project you're just talking about. No.
No. This was I loved doing that. That was such fun, and it was my last sort of big premiere before everything sort of went. And this was a commission from the Rundfunkchor in Berlin to celebrate Beethoven's 250th birthday. And they commissioned a 45-minute piece for 10 choirs from Brazil, Lebanon, Sweden, Tasmania, Philippines, Singapore, all over the place. And I've been working with all those 10 choral directors really closely, because all the different choirs are sort of very different in terms of what their standard repertoire is, and their technical levels, and their size. And so, you know, the whole thing was incredibly complex. And but it was huge fun, and we did it, and we managed, and we got a piece that everybody was happy with, and everybody had already started rehearsing. And I got some wonderful photos on Facebook of like the choir in Brazil sort of holding their scores, you know, saying Panufnik with sort of surprised eyes above, you know, 40 of them doing that. And just, you know, the whole thing, the excitement was really building. And then splat. So there we go.
Did Beethoven feature in the piece at all? Does he feature?
Hugely. So my wonderful, brilliant writing partner, Jessica Duchin, had taken excerpts of letters by the great man himself, and extracts of writing from his favorite writers. So Beethoven, as I'm sure you know, used to have this little notebook where he would write his favorite sort of extracts of from people like Goethe and Schiller and Sturm and Kant and all these people. And he so this is what we get, and we get a beautiful libretto which is in four parts, and the first part is nature and truth, and then we have struggle and affliction when he loses his hearing, and we have part of the Heiligenstadt Testament, and then we have love, and we have that famous immortal beloved letter, and then we have transcendence and humanity. At the end, Jess has written this beautiful ode to Beethoven. It's just wonderful, and all the choirs sing in the introduction, and all the choirs sing the ode to Beethoven, and then they all have their moment throughout the piece with a song, as it were, where they're supported and agreed with and commented on by the Rundfunk, or the host choir. So yeah, it was going to be quite a production. And also we had opera director Karen Gillingham on board, because there isn't enough room on the Philharmonie stage to fit in 450 singers and orchestral players, and so some of them were going to be in the auditorium, and there was going to be sort of movement. So you can see how that would take a lot of rescheduling.
And when are we going to hear it in London?
God knows, and I really hope that it will be done in London. I've also done it because I was thinking, God, would it ever get performed again? 10 choirs and symphony orchestra. So I've actually written it so that it can also be performed by just 3 choirs and symphony orchestra.
I was trying to remember when you first crossed paths with the London Mozart players. I know we did a wonderful choral piece. I can't remember when it was. You probably remember better than I do.
Well, I do remember, because that 4 choral seasons that you played it. Did you play in it, or were you there?
I was in the audience.
Are you in the audience? Oh, bless you even more for coming. Thank you. But the summer and spring movement, where the summer was commissioned by the Wainfleet singers, and with Andrew Lumsden, and the London Mozart players accompanied. And this was in something like 2008 or 9, and Simon Funnell was there, and said, we really enjoyed this working experience, and let's do some more. And so that's how it all started.
Just come back, and then of course we had that memorable occasion when we premiered your 4 seasons for TASMAN.
4 world seasons.
4 world seasons.
Yeah.
I have a very personal, happy memory of that, because I happened to be standing near you when you said, I think, was it to Simon Funnell, you said, I really want to get a Tibetan singing bowl in it, but we don't want to have an extra player to play that. How will we do it? And I said, I'll play it. So you wrote it into the cello part. What I'll never forget is the first performance was in Basingstoke, and it was a live broadcast, and we were also playing, in the second half, we were playing Strauss' Bourgeois Gentilhomme, which is a fantastic, huge score with the most wonderful cello solo. And I was far more nervous about hitting that singing bowl in the right place. Than Strauss. I had newfound respect for percussion players. I say this to all percussion players, if anyone you might be listening. It's terrifying, just doing that little ting. And I think you said to me afterwards, you said, that was wonderful. You said the last one, it was pianissimo. How did you do that? And I said, I have no idea. I'll never do it again.
Well, you
Anyway,
were brilliant at it. You were very good.
well, thank you very much. I wasn't looking for the compliment, but thank you.
Okay.
But that was great fun, that project. We really enjoyed that.
Oh, good. Well, so did I.
And then the most recent thing we did was with your other orchestra, the Amadeus Orchestra from Poland. That was just last year as well.
Yes, that was a long-held dream. And I remember talking about that with LMP, like 6 years ago or something.
I was there at that meeting, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we had this idea, and the dream finally came true, and it was so worth waiting for because it was the most extraordinary evening. It was fantastic.
It was wonderful.
And not only was the performance stunning of my piece, it was amazing, but all the other performances of the other pieces and the Polish song and dance troupe who came and performed in the interval. And we had a full church. It was pretty cold, but everybody was so warmed by the amazing atmosphere of that concert, and I'm longing to get LMP now back out to Poland to do a sort of reciprocal concert with the Amadeus Orchestra.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
How strong is the Polish connection in your heart? I mean, I know where it is in your name and in your heritage, and your father's music is well known. But what does Poland mean to you?
I mean, it is, it is hugely important, and I've never felt, even as a child, even though I was born here, I have never felt completely English. And it's interesting because at primary school, I never felt that I fitted in, and I didn't realize until I was an adult that I had struggles with all sorts of things. Like, everyone in my year was called, I remember I desperately wanted to be called Emma or Sophie or Charlotte or Louise, but I was called Roxanna, and even just that kind of felt like it set me apart. And nobody was mean to me about it, but I now, looking back on it, see how that I always felt different, and it's those differences now that I really rejoice in. And I think just as I, over the years, I've become closer and closer to my Polish roots. I became a Catholic in my early 20s, and I've been trying and failing to learn Polish for pretty much 30 years now, of on and off Polish evening classes. And it is such a hard language, but I feel very at home with all things Polish. And I once wrote a piece, actually, and it's a Polish theme and variations called Second Home. And that's very much how I feel about it.
It's very interesting. This interview isn't about me, but actually we have a great parallel. I also grew up with a funny sounding name, and regretted it all my childhood. And what you probably don't know is that my roots are actually in what is now Wrocław in Poland.
Wow!
Although my father was born in Breslau, which was Germany, but then has since become Wrocław, where I've never yet been. So I'm longing to go there.
Wow! Wow! Fantastic.
So I don't feel at all Polish. But it's very interesting to hear you to hear what it means to you, even second generation. So your father didn't speak Polish at home, do you?
No. So when Dad came to the UK, he'd had an extremely traumatic sort of last 15 years in Poland, which encompassed the hideousness of living in Nazi, then Soviet-occupied Warsaw, relatives killed or died of illness, starvation, then extreme limitations of socialist realism, and having to constantly do what he was told, and not being, no free speech or free license to create what he wanted to create. And so he had this very dramatic and traumatic escape from the KGB in Zurich, and got to London in 1954. And I think by the time he'd met and married my mum in the early 60s, and then I came along, he just wanted to put all that behind him and move on, because he had to look forwards, because looking backwards was still very raw and traumatic. So my mother, bless her, did learn Polish while she was pregnant with me, and unfortunately she stopped when I was born, and by the time I was learning to speak, she'd forgotten it all, and my father didn't really want to speak Polish with her, so that didn't happen, and I didn't hear any Polish around me as a child, so I really have had to do all that myself. But it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
What do you think your father would say if he saw now how you're refinding your Polish roots?
I think he would be really pleased and really happy. Poland's a very different place now to how it was when he left it. And obviously there's a lot more freedom in all sorts of, in every way. And, people would argue, obviously, the government is a bit dodgy at the moment, but they'll go at some stage. And sorry?
That could be anywhere, but let's not go there.
Yeah, exactly. But he would have been thrilled, and thrilled that I'm working with Polish musicians, and that I'm working so much with Polish music. I do a huge amount with Polish folk music, and also I've been doing a lot with his, doing transcriptions and rearrangements of some of his early works so that they can have a new life as well. And I think he'd be really, really thrilled.
Does he still have a big reputation in Poland? Is he celebrated?
Yeah. It's different in Poland because it's not just as a composer and conductor, it's because of the political stand that he took when he escaped, and the speeches that he made on world service and everything. So as a historical figure, he's very well known also.
We were doing a composing workshop with a school in, I think it was in Portsmouth a few months ago, and talking with students about how themes are dreamt up. And one of the subjects I brought up was how Bach happened to be blessed with the name BACH, and he could turn that into, and Shostakovich, DSCH. And I was just thinking, where do you start with Panufnik? You haven't got any notes in that. So have you ever? So the question somebody asked me, and I'll pass it on to you, is where do you start if you have to? Where do you start with a theme, with a tune? Where do you get your inspiration? Obviously not from your name.
Wow. Every time when I get a commission, I get a brief, and it's usually it's for some kind of occasion, some kind of anniversary or an event, or there's a theme for the concert. And so I will be spending some time, first week or two that I spend on that piece will be researching, planning, talking to people. And while I'm doing that, a sort of fermentation process goes on in my head. And I start thinking about sort of more, I'm thinking about musical atmospheres, and that might be a sort of fragment of rhythm or melody or harmony. So by the time I actually sit down at my piano, and by the way, this used to be my dad's piano that he used to compose on in his studio. It's a baby Bechstein. and so I'm very lucky to be able to have it in my shed. And so by the time I get to sit down at this piano, I've already got an idea of what I'm looking for. And so I start figuring out the pitches and playing around with harmonies. And then I start putting it onto Sibelius software to notate it. And I'm endlessly fiddling with that. And so that's how it all starts, really.
The composition process happens at the piano?
Initially, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much.
Are you a pianist by training?
Well, if I tell you it took me 12 years to get to grade 5,
right.
You'll see that I'm not.
Right.
So I got the furthest on the flute. I got grade 8 flute with distinction. Thank you.
Well
and, and then I got grade 6 harp with distinction. And that was my second study at music college, when my first study was composition. But then I got tendon trouble and I couldn't carry on. And so grade 5 piano and grade 4 guitar 38 years ago, which is about to come in incredibly useful because I'm about to write a guitar piece. So yeah, so and grade 5 singing. And so I mean, it's probably just as well that I got training on several different families of instruments, because obviously that has really helped with the composing.
But it's interesting that it starts on the piano. And,
yeah.
And how do you find that having computer software to I won't say aid composition, because that's the question. Does it affect how you compose, the fact that you can see it and hear it instantly?
It does, because I'm very limited on the piano. Then the playback is helpful, so that when I want to add further lines and further instruments and further ideas, which I can't necessarily do with 10 fingers, that is very helpful. And the other thing is that I have this bizarre rhythmic dyslexia, in that I can hear rhythm, I can appreciate rhythm, and I can feel it, but I can't do it. I can't play in time, I can't dance to save my life, and I could never conduct. So which is probably just as well. And what is extremely helpful about the playback is it shows me that I've written what I thought I heard. It sort of confirms that for me. So that's really helpful.
Oh, interesting. And do you think that the advent of computer technology has changed your approach to composition and affected it in any way?
I'm sure it has. I mean, I have to say that I started using this notation software in 1995. I've been using it for most of my professional life. So I don't have much to compare it to. Yeah. I can only think that it's enhanced it. It's quite hard to see, to imagine what might have happened if I hadn't been using it. But I'm sure that my composing is all the richer because of it. And I frequently have panics, and I think, what would happen if suddenly we had no electricity for a while, or and I wasn't able to compose without the computer. And I'm first to confess that I have become quite reliant on it.
Interesting. I suppose if they'd had this technology 200 years ago, we wouldn't have half the arguments we have when we're performing. Particularly Schubert, I always think, is so inconsistent. By the time he comes down to the recapitulation, everything's different in tiny ways, and you think, 10 hours arguing, did he mean that, or was he right hastily? And so it would probably help him.
That's interesting. Well, I'm glad to hear that's a benefit for you now.
Well, it'll cut out future arguments in generations to come when they're playing your music. Roxanna, I'm aware I've taken up lots of your time.
No.
Thank you so much for this. we really hope we're going to see you live in one of our concert halls very soon when all this is over. But it's lovely that you gave us your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And,
my pleasure.
See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank
Love to
you.
everybody at LMP.
Thank you. I'll pass it on.
Thank you.